Yesterday, we were discussing the makeup of the body and the spiritual makeup of the soul. The body, if you read the narrative in the Torah, was initially made of earth, formed into the outer limbs, the inner organs of whatever human being is, and it was infused with the soul. As the Torah tells us, God blew into Adam's nostrils a soul of life, and he became a fully functioning human being.
Nefesh Chaim.
Nefesh Chayo. Chayo. So the soul, the component called soul, is something totally spiritual. There's nothing more spiritual in creation than the Jewish soul. The body is totally physical. Earth represents earthiness, heaviness, something which is unrefined, something which gravitates towards everything which is the antithesis of spirituality, desire, ego. That's all rooted in the physicality of the human being. That's the physical persona of a human being. But a human being is more than an intellectual animal. A human being, because he's endowed with this spiritual component called the soul, which is there's nothing comparable to this in creation. Its dimension of holiness, its capacity is greater than the greatest angel, and it's meant to be part of eternity. If one merits eternity, it has the ability, because of its intenseness of holiness, to take something that's mundane and earthy and to spiritualize it, that even the lesser value takes on the qualities of the greater value, and it could be spiritualized. I'll give you an example, which this example I didn't give in the past. If you take a branch and you graft it onto a tree, and you do the graft correctly, what happens over time? The branch meshes with the tree fully, and it's integrated into the ecology of the tree, and eventually what flows through the tree flows through that branch. And as that tree produces that fruit, this branch produces that fruit. The soul and the body are fused together. There's a fusion. And just as that graft, for it to take, the tree has to be nurtured and fertilized and watered. And only then, and the outer environment has to be correct for it fully to develop into one. Identically, if the environment is right, then the soul, the graft of the soul is grafted to the body is grafted to the soul. The soul takes on the characteristics of the soul, which is a spiritual persona. It's less earthy. But on the other hand, the soul cannot take on the persona of physicality, because that's a different dimension. See, everything in creation is rooted in energy. It's a spiritual energy, except it's earthy because God willed a lesser energy, which allows it to manifest itself as earthiness. But if that earthiness is infused with a greater level of spiritual energy, then it's advanced and elevated and starts taking on the characteristics of something that's spiritual. The soul being totally spiritual has no relevance to the physical. So all you can do is the soul, you can actually embed it in the body as if the soul is not there. But if the body is used to facilitate the objective of the soul, that's exactly the graft. That's what is done. It's meant that the soul should use the body. The soul cannot function independent of the body. You want to put on tefillin, you have to have a hand. You have to have ability, motor skills, flexibility to tighten it on your upper arm and to fasten it to your arm and to put it on your head. Or the mind, the chemical activity of the brain, which has many functions: understanding, retentiveness, comparison, whatever it may be, moods, joy, commitment, all this, which allows internalization into the being itself. If you use that mind as the vehicle to actualize spirituality, it assumes that level of spirituality because it's used in that vein. It's used within that context. I spoke at my grandson's bar mitzvah a number of months ago, and I said something interesting, that a parent has an obligation to raise a child. You bring a child into this world, you have an obligation to raise the child properly. You should provide for it, food, clothing, hygiene, teach the child manners, morals, ethics. That's the responsibility of a parent to a child. That the child should be a contribution to society and to himself. As a Jew, a parent has more than an obligation just to mentor that child to be an ethical, moral human being. It's to train that child to live within the context of a Jew, which is the Torah itself. And you begin mentoring the child, teaching the child, engaging him in certain activities, which he will be obligated as an adult when he becomes of age, of certain ages. So the Talmud tells us in two locations that when a child begins speaking, what is the first words he's supposed to teach a child? Torah tziva lanu Moshe Moshe Kilas Yaakov. The Torah was commanded to us by Moshe. It is the heritage of the congregation of Jacob. That's the first words that a father or mother has to teach a child. The second words you teach a child, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, which is the fundamental of Jewish belief. When you teach that child to mouth those words, the child has no understanding of what those words mean. It's only when the brain is sufficiently developed to be able to articulate words, those words, these are the first words the child should verbalize, express. Torah tziva lanu Moshe, which is encompasses the totality of the Torah and the objective of Jewish life, a Jew's life, and his belief, Shema Yisrael, the unity of God. But if the child doesn't understand it, why? He reaches an age, he has a level of some degree of understanding, we understand. But those should be the first words to teach the child. Now, when does he reach a level he's able to speak? When the brain function, which controls speech, is developed sufficiently to be able to speak. That function, its first usage should be for these words. That means you're exposing it to innate holiness. Those words contain innate holiness. That's the objective of all existence. That first verse. The second verse is the totality of existence, that's God. So the brain function, which expresses it, the first usage of that brain function should be to articulate those words. It's a spiritualization of the brain that when it says the words and verbalizes things, the foundation is that. It's very interesting. The Mishnah tells us in Pirkei Avos, in Ethics of our Fathers, that if you teach a child when he's young, it's like writing something on a piece of paper or parchment which hasn't been written on before. And therefore, as a result of that, the ink that you write absorbs into that parchment or into that paper, and therefore the child is able to retain that information you teach him. Person learns when he's older, because there's so much other information absorbed into that memory bank. When you teach him the Torah afterwards, it doesn't absorb as deeply. It's like a blotted piece of paper. What happens if you have, let's say, a piece of parchment, you write on it, and then you want to write on it again? What do? You take a blade, you scrape off the surface ink, so you can write on it again. But you realize in terms of absorption, it's reached its maximum absorption. So what is the depth of that penetration? Just superficial. Therefore, easily it can be removed from that parchment. But if it's deeply embedded, absorbed, then it becomes part of the parchment. Teaching a child when he's young, the memory bank doesn't contain much information. Therefore, it has a tremendous capacity. So when the information goes in there, it's more easily to retain. When you have other stuff in there, it's like, you clean out your computer, there's all that junk and all that other stuff in there. You gotta clean it out. The human brain, you can't clean out. Anything that goes in there is there permanently. As a result of that, what you add to it, it only goes to such a point, can't go beyond that. So I'm saying the brain function, the first words the child speaks, although he has no understanding what those words mean. But since innately those words are holy words and the words represent the totality and the purpose of existence, that brain is being spiritualized, is being like, when they would send out a ship to sea, they would christen the ship. What did they do? They took a bottle of champagne, smashed it on the hole, the ship goes out to sea. Lahavdil. The Jewish brain, we're mentoring the Jewish brain. What's the first mentoring experience? Torah Tziv Elanu Moshe, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. That's how we're mentoring that brain. We're launching it to be able to process everything in life through that faculty, which is called the brain. We find there's certain things in existence. For instance, you have certain materials that are flammable. Some materials are not flammable. What differentiates why some are and some not? It's based on its molecular makeup. And based on that determines whether it's one thing or another. So God, when he created, whatever he created, the energy which was released to evolve into that physical entity, based on its makeup, its molecular makeup, it's flammable. Others flame retardant. No, doesn't burn. But everything, it's because the way the energy which God allowed that to manifest itself, and that's the way it manifests itself. The soul has a greater degree of holiness because it's a different level of energy which allowed the soul to come into being. It's called an illuminated energy, which is what represents the ultimate of holiness. We have different species. You have the animal kingdom. You have the plant kingdom. You have fish. You have insects. These are various echelons in the life, in the hierarchy in life. It's a different level of function. I mean, God willed a different kind of energy to bring about the animal, the fish, the plant. Plant has life. It's a different kind of life than the animal. The human being is the ultimate life. That's the most advanced level of life. Has a different energy, a more closer to more spiritualized, has a greater capacity. But in terms of the physical, if we pair it with the soul, as I said, that means the physical is being utilized and functioning to facilitate spiritual endeavors. That spiritualizes the physical because it's being utilized, it's being meshed and paired with the soul. But if the soul body is not being paired with the soul, and the body goes its own merry way, so to say, indulgence, and whatever it's inclined to, has no relevance in its soul. So what does it remain? It remains earthy and gets more earthy and more dense and more dark and more committed to that physical, what we call addiction. You're addicted to the physical. What motivates? What's the motivation for invention? For advancing society? It's all human survival and human comfort. I remember when I went to the World's Fair in 1963, 64, which was in Queens. So you went into, so GE had a pavilion. AT&T had a pavilion. And they showed that you had a phone that eventually, when you speak on the phone, you can see the person you're speaking to. That advanced level of appliances, which didn't exist then. And they showed that at one time, it would take 60 hours a week to maintain a house, and we're able to reduce it to 5 hours a week with all these new inventions. So what was the motivation and the drive to create these new inventions? To create conveniences for society, we should have more time, more time. Used to have people worked an 80-hour week, then 60, 40. They want to get it down to 30. And what to do with additional hours? It's going to be called leisure time. You can explore the world. And what's the level of productivity of that? Just comfort, pleasure. But in terms of, so what's the drive for invention or make money to provide more of that comfort, more of the comfort? So it becomes addictive. Everything is addictive driven to satisfy the beast. More comfort. Push the envelope to the nth degree. People, they take certain medication because they want to live life like a 25-year-old. But you're 60 years old, you're not 25. But I'm not giving up. Until God pulls the plug, I'm not giving up. I want to be seen and feel like a 25-year-old. Okay. But that's what life's all about. If you want to be more productive like a 25-year-old, your level of productivity is greater. That's okay. That's very positive. But to feel that way, to be able to enjoy life, living is not enjoying. Living is accomplishment. That's what living's all about, to accomplish. But if you accomplish nothing, person goes and invests his life. He sits by a creek with a corncob pipe, and he has a net, and all day he does. Every once in a while, he puts the net in the creek, and he catches minnows all day. At the end of the day, he counts up the minnows and throws them back in the lake. And he enjoys it. What is that person doing? He's wasting his life, just wasting it away. What's the value? Well, but I'm at peace with myself. I'm not nervous. I'm not stressed. Is that what life's all about? Not to be stressed? Is that what it's about? Was life to be productive, and by not being stressed, you'd be more productive? Okay, then not being stressed has value. Not being distracted has value. Within the context of a Jew's life, the objective is to mesh the body with the soul, that the body should be the medium to facilitate the objective of the soul. When that happens, the body assumes spiritual characteristics, because they're meshing, they're being paired one with another, and they work in tandem with one another. But if the body forgets about the soul, and all you invest in the body, it's just more of that earthiness, and it becomes exaggerated and becomes more intense. And that's why the world looks the way it looks. Advanced. They say China has a missile now. They could shoot this missile or a drone. It's 3 times the speed of sound. You know what that is? It could destroy, you can't even detect it. That's how fast it goes. It's frightening to think about it. To be able to nip it, to destroy it even before it takes off almost. Because the moment it takes off, it's here. That's how advanced we've become. But that's not what life's all about. To create systems that I could destroy you in a blink of an eye. Unless it's productive, you're destroying something which is evil. But that's exactly what life's all about. The infusion of spirituality, spiritualizing the physical, which we resurrected to be part of eternity because it has been upgraded and integrated through the pairing system of soul and body. In the 60s, till the 60s, there was no such thing as men's fashion. Women's fashion, yeah, there was no such thing as men's fashion. In the 60s, mid-60s, all of a sudden, they created men's fashion. Maybe, in make-believe land, La La Land, Hollywood, you had fashion. But among the masses, even if a person was substantial, everything was very conservative. You wore it to be presentable. It wasn't fashion. Everything was purpose. You need clothing to provide. It wasn't to be fashionable. It wasn't to be attractive. That's for a woman. That's not a man. Then all of a sudden, no, men also have to be attractive. The whole mindset, direction of society changed. Everything at one time was the work ethic, the hardcore work ethic. Clothing, you have a business suit. You're a laborer, you have a laborer's clothing, whatever it is, that's what you did. Today, I'm not sure if Barney's is still in business. I think they went out of business. Barney's, they used to have a Barney's once a year sale. You could buy a suit that sells for $8,000 to $3,500. That's the discount. People ran to that sale. You know what it means to get such a discount? And they bought it, they put it in their closet. Next year, another sale. Even a better discount. Better quality suit, you buy it. Put it in your closet. You haven't worn the suit, you haven't taken the tags off last year's suit. It's still hanging there, but you're buying the new suit. And eventually, he has to get a bigger apartment because his wardrobe has outgrown his apartment. You ever hear such a thing? And I'm not being facetious, I'm not overstating it. People live lives of clutter. How can I turn it down? It's such a good buy, I'll buy two of them. But how often are you going to wear it? Well, that special occasion. Maybe. So you're not living life for purpose. You're living life purely for a sense of, I have, to enhance yourself, to ingratiate yourself, to intoxicate yourself. That's what it's all about. It's off the mark, way off the mark.